Hi, and welcome to another exciting Tales from the Gulag. Today's the 28th of July 2020, and before I launch into today's topic, a little update about my glasses of eternal wisdom from my previous topic. I still haven't been to the optician, and I still read the computer screen sans the glasses better than with them. So meanwhile, if I'm using things like medicine or some electrical doodad that has that vital life-saving instruction on the packet that I need to know if I'm not going to kill myself, well, I sort of just have to wing it. But so far so good, because I'm still here to give you another Tales from the Gulag, so I can't be doing too badly, I guess. Anyway, this gives me a great segue into my topic for today. Believe the scientists, he said. This arose from one of those friendly workplace conversations while the news was going on in the staff room. There was poor Xi Jinping, Winnie the Pooh, that cuddly teddy bear, who was the victim of that mean, nasty Donald Trump, who was blaming him and poor innocent China for the outbreak of the CCP virus. Well, the conversation went on to how Trump was seriously mishandling the virus and trying to blame China on this whole thing. I'm sure you've heard it all before. Believe the scientists, he said. I couldn't help myself, and there's a bit of a language warning for this episode. What? I said, pointing to Xi Jinping and the communist thugs of the Politburo at that 70th anniversary gathering. I said, what? Trust those bastards? I wouldn't trust them any further than I could throw them. How often have you heard, believe the scientists, as in 97% of climate scientists agree that climate change is real? Have you ever heard that one? It's the ultimate appeal to authority, and it's a logical fallacy. Why? Because what you are then saying is that who says it matters more than what they actually say. And statements like that are designed to be nothing more than a smear. They are simply used to imply that those who disagree with the agenda, whatever it may be, are just hillbilly rednecks who ignore the facts while beating their wives because the Bible tells them to. That's all it is. So let's look at this, but first of all, the scientific method. The scientific method is great. It's simply about gathering facts and data, observing how things work, and then you draw your conclusions from them, which you then test by experimentation. Well, let me tell you this. Christians do not fear the scientific method. In fact, they invented it. It is the go-to method that you use when you want to understand how the physical world works. And further than that, let's talk about revelation. Revelation is another facet of knowledge, only about things that we can't necessarily observe. It's about divine things, of right and wrong, and those kinds of questions. 1 John chapter 1 opens with, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. As Christians, we believe that God has spoken to us and revealed himself to us. Why? Because he was seen and heard, and yes, the apostles even touched him. This is how we know not only that God exists, but we also know who he is, we know what his name is, what he wants for us, where we are going, and how we can live in a relationship with him. Because all of this happened at a definite point in history and was verified by Jesus rising again from the dead. And guess what the surprise is? It actually sounds a little bit like the scientific method. So let's have a look at some reasons to be healthily sceptical of the men in the white lab coats. Exhibit 1, Galileo, is actually a bit of a digression from the topic, but it's worth just having a quick look at it because it comes up often when we are dealing with the critics of Christianity vis-a-vis science. You know, Galileo, the guy who got into trouble for teaching that the Earth orbits around the sun and not the other way around. Well, not quite, not actually. The fact is that Galileo and the Pope were in fact pretty good friends, and the Pope and the upper hierarchy in the church actually agreed with him. At first, the Pope advised Galileo that he could teach these theories, but as a theory and not as established, proven fact. Now, this is actually a reasonable request because for quite a while, pushing 300 years in fact, the theory was always open to question on scientific grounds because the instruments that were available for some time yet were not quite accurate enough to make the measurements necessary to prove Galileo's case beyond all doubt. So what actually got Galileo into trouble? It was actually his personal attacks and ridicule of the Pope as a person. The truth is that Galileo had that kind of personality that revelled in a good man-to-man intellectual punch-up, and in this case, he got one. So we are given this picture of the man in the lab coats who just looks at the evidence, stirring up his test tubes, who'll simply observe and see where the evidence goes. But if only that were actually true. For example, Exhibit 2. Proponents of the theory of evolution like to use as evidence the famous pictures of the embryos of the human, the salamander, the pig and so on. I'm sure you've all seen those pictures and you're familiar with it. Well, the problem is that this proof was put forward by Ernst Haeckel, an Austrian biologist who wanted to back up Darwin's theories by comparing these famous embryos, and he published his now famous pictures in 1874. But the problem was that they were fake. And the funny thing is, the scientists still use them, knowing full well that they were a fraud. They still appear in biology exams for Year 12 students, and in fact I remember seeing a Year 12 biology exam for the students in Queensland some years back that showed these pictures and asked how they prove the theory of evolution. Well, if you were a student who wanted to actually pass that exam, you would have given the ideology and simply written the answer that the examiners were looking for. But if you were actually more intellectually honest and you wanted to give the correct answer, you would have to say that in fact these pictures prove nothing because they were made up and they have no scientific merit whatsoever. So yes, the men in the white lab coats do lie. I remember one scientific fraud going some time back again, where there are a couple of guys in white lab coats who claim to have discovered how to get power by nuclear fusion. They were feted by the press until their work turned out also to be a complete fraud. No doubt these two were driven by what? 5 minutes of fame? Or how about the climate scientists? This goes to the 97%. I clearly remember them talking about not global warming, but once upon a time it was the threat of an ice age if we didn't cut down our carbon emissions. Only later it became global warming, or what is it now? Just climate change. They made predictions about there being no polar ice cap by 2008, or was it going to be 2012, revised again to 2016, or is it now we only have 20 years left if we don't change our evil ways and invest in solar power? But we seem to be living up to another extension of that date. Rising ocean levels. We're going to drown out those low-lying Pacific atolls and islands like Kiribati. Only in fact there is more of Kiribati and not less. No, that hasn't worked out either. But still the men in the white lab coats, the experts, keep telling us to change our ways or we will cook. Here there's probably too much government money and prestige to give this one away. Or how about gender stuff? Another favourite. The white men in lab coats of the Australian Medical Association and other august scientific bodies around the world tell us now that gender is fluid, implying that all a man has to do is to put on a dress, wish really hard and poof, almost by magic, he becomes a woman. Yes, one man with a doctorate and a lab coat, our famous ABC medical expert Norman Swan, talked about people who get pregnant. That's funny there because I always thought, on the basis of my life's experience, that only women got pregnant. Maybe my trouble is that I don't have a doctorate, I haven't got a medical degree, and all I've got to rely on is what I can see backed up by common sense. Or one has to think of another exhibit. What are we up to, 4 or 5? This one I think is a real beauty. The University of New South Wales now requires its people to say that the Aboriginal population has been in Australia not for 40,000 years or whatever the current guess is, but they have been here since the dream time, whatever that is. The more intellectually honest approach is to say that we don't know how long they've been on the continent, but no, ideology means that ideology trumps mythology. Try it again. Ideology trumps facts and data. Or you turn to the current issue, the CCP virus, and how we should deal with it. Now, the fact is that the scientists, or at least the real ones, didn't know much about the virus or how to deal with it because, by definition, it is the novel or a new coronavirus. But China and the scientists in the World Health Organization were not very helpful on this one because I guess there was too much Chinese money and power at stake here. The World Health Organization have been working really hard using Tedros Adhanom's uh, track record of covering up epidemics. to try to cover up this particular epidemic. So you're going to have to forgive my scepticism when they make their pronouncements about this or that issue. I'm prepared to give people the benefit of a doubt on what they're trying to tell me, but when they have proven themselves to be unreliable liars, then actually I think I've got nothing to apologise for if I don't simply believe them. Yep, the guy in the lab coat is meant to look at the data, draw up his theories and test them, and go simply where the evidence takes them. That's the ideal, and if only it were actually true. But in reality, the guy in the lab coat is also human. He has his pet theories, his political agendas, his political opinions, and a livelihood that he likes to protect. Of course, some are more intellectually honest than others, but there is a long track record that goes way beyond the handful of examples that I've given that all show that when big government money and grants meet the scientific method, it's usually the science that goes. And this is especially true in the kind of times that we live in now, that says that there is no objective reality, but our feelings decide what is true, as in the saying, that may be your truth or it is my truth. You know that one? How's that one going to turn out? Stupidity can only then take the place of reason, logic, and science. So when we are trying to implement public or social policy that is actually going to be helpful, be it on climate change, gender, CCP virus, or whatever, we need both a reliable moral compass and good scientific facts to guide us. The moral compass comes from revelation. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And the solid facts come from the scientific method, gathering the data and going where the evidence takes you. Yep, we need both, and yet big government money, abetted by the vanity of the men in the white lab coats, have helped us to throw out both of them. And the result can only be the rise of stupidity, where there is lots of misery and suffering to go around for everybody. So it's QED for the Bible, I guess. And thank you for watching.